All right. Welcome back, everyone. This afternoon's presentation is about the state of the industry for quantum computing. Um, there's an aspect to me that's just like, oh, quantum computing's cool. We'll be able to solve these new kinds of problems that we haven't seen before. But there's also the other aspect of that. There's a value to that, and people are more and more recognizing the direction in which this is going. Um, Firms like Google and IBM and Merck and Visa and all these other firms are starting to show that they can solve real problems better than classical computing can, and the money's starting to follow that. Now, it's of course, we all want, stimulating jobs and stuff, but it's also nice to be able to go on vacation. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the industry, how the investment is going, how careers are going, and things like that. So, current market size and revenue. All right. Quantum technology as a whole right now is around $4 billion, with about 650 to 750 million of that from quantum computing. Now, 2025 saw a lot of changes. Even as we cut back government research funding for life sciences and things like that, we scaled it up for quantum computing and semiconductor manufacturing. Okay, so we're going to be well over $1 billion by the end of 2025. Not only are we seeing the governmental spending on this and the university spending on this, not only are we seeing like IBM, Google, Quantum, but now we're starting to see a little bit more of the venture capital. We're seeing more firms whose primary purpose isn't computing. Visa has a quantum computing department. Moderna, the pharmaceutical company, has a quantum computing department. We're starting to see more and more of this pop up as these corporations try to get ahead of the curve. So we're going to begin seeing the same kind of players that have been such a big part of the machine learning boom and the dot-com boom, and these other technological surges that we've had start to play a part in quantum computing. Startup investments were around $2 billion in 2024, 1.3 billion private, 680 million public. Government funding has surged. Japan is investing so much money, venture capital, and we're starting to have some clusters emerge. Tel Aviv, Tokyo, Japan has so much. Abu Dhabi, and then in the US we have Illinois, Maryland. There's also quite a bit going on in Boulder, Colorado. We're starting to see these centers emerge. Some universities are starting to have install their own systems 2 architectures from IBM. IBM is starting to sell these quantum computing platforms. They're starting to get spread around the country. Innovations and patents. The patents are up 13% year over year. IBM and Google are leading the way still. China has about 60% of the patents. US leads in communication. So 25 of U.S. leaders, like congressmen and stuff like that, are invested in quantum. 76 report high value. And stocks have seen steady gains. And you have to realize that there's an entire ecosystem building up around this. So you have the big tech giants like Google and IBM and Quantinuum, and these people who are all about, quantum computing, or they're a major technological firm. There's an entire infrastructure that supports this, from the cloud architecture to the dilution refrigerators to the materials needed to the control architectures, whether that's like microwave or whether that's laser based. There's an entire infrastructure building up around this. And there's a real aspect that we're developing these algorithms, these computing architectures as quickly as we can, but a major break to that is building this infrastructure, and it's starting to pick up speed around it. Some real tech advances we've seen is the last few years we've been focusing on qubit scaling, more and more qubits. Years ago we only had 5 qubits, like 2016, 5 qubits, but like since 2023 we've had 127, 133 qubit systems. But the number of qubits isn't the entire story. A major issue that we have is how long these qubits can maintain coherence. That is, how long does this measurement remain a pure quantum state before it devolves into noise, whether that's heat from the environment or electromagnetic radiation. So these factors of noise and architecture and scaling are starting to take over. Later this year, IBM's supposed to announce Nighthawk, I believe, and it's going to double the connectivity between the qubits while having the same number of qubits, but like by doubling the connectivity, it's going to be so much more powerful, and it's one of those things that the focus is shifting a little bit. Additionally, anybody who's following quantum computing lately has really seen that error correction just permeates the space. Now, for anyone unfamiliar, you have a qubit, and that qubit has a chance of experiencing some noise. So you can use multiple qubits to kind of reinforce each other. You can have them vote on what the actual right result is. And the schemes for how that error correction works are still being actively developed. So error correction, qubit connectivity, reducing noise, increasing coherence are all just as much a factor as the pure number of qubits that the system has. Okay? You'll often see these differences talked about between logical and physical qubits. A logical qubit is like what we think of when we're building the circuit, whereas a physical qubit is how many qubits it takes to do that. So we might have, let's say, 3 qubits voting together to try to reduce the error of a certain thing. So Microsoft and Continuum have 12 logical qubits, that is, that they have high error correction rates for 12 qubits. Quantum processing units, there's 40 commercial from 24 manufacturers, which is insane. That's there's 24 different companies making quantum computing now. All right, but while I've said that for the last couple years, we've pivoted from scaling the number of qubits to scaling the coherence and scaling the connectivity of these qubits, we are still scaling. IBM's had a roadmap that they've been adhering to for years, I think since 2018 or so. They've hit every milestone. And they're talking about a modular system 2, where they're going to have 4,000 plus qubits. It still feels a little bit insane to me, but they're projecting 1 million qubits by 2030. Google has a logical qubit prototype with error reduction with more physical qubits. Microsoft earlier this spring announced the Majorana 1 processor. It's still not exactly clear how that's going to pan out. If it is as good as they say it is, it would be game-changing. Now, most likely it's somewhere between not good at all and as good as they say it is, but still, it's an interesting development. IonQ is scaling, as well as others at Amazon and Ocelot, Quantinuum. And it's difficult to do an apples-to-apples comparison of these different quantum computing architectures. So unlike the traditional transistors we're very familiar with our traditional classical computers, there are multiple ways of realizing a quantum computer. There's superconducting qubits, there's trapped ions, there's neutral atoms, there's Rydberg atoms, there's photonic, there's topological, like Microsoft is talking about. So it's really difficult to make an apples-to-apples comparison, because while this company may have more qubits, they may have lower decoherence times, or it may take them longer to reset them. But we're seeing this play out. Right now, it seems to me like IBM and superconducting qubits are winning because we're really good at making these kinds of chips. and they're able to iterate on it quickly. But at the same time, it's still not apparent that one methodology or another will win out. And this is kind of what I've talked about as well around the infrastructure around it. These quantum computers are very sensitive to noise. NASA's been developing an ultra-cold sensor. Like, it is a problem when our measurement sensor is introducing heat or electromagnetic radiation into the system. Post-quantum cryptography is very mature. A lot of people, when they talk about quantum computing, are worried about it breaking RSA. We're largely past RSA. We've moved on to other algorithms that are more resilient to breaking by quantum computing. A caveat to that would be a lot of illicit actors are following a harvest now, decrypt later scheme. So, if you have material that you need encrypted, I'd make sure it is a quantum safe cryptography. However, the interesting application with quantum computing and cryptography isn't as much it breaking classical cryptography, but its capabilities for securing information. Through quantum teleportation schemes and other quantum communication, quantum presents a potentially very, very safe and secure method for securing data. And we're seeing the workforce and investments in quantum computing just continually advance. The last year saw a slowdown in many tech firms and stuff. I'm sure all of you are very aware of that. We saw a slowdown in quantum jobs as well, but it's not growing as fast as opposed to like shrinking. But still, I believe if you take a look at a multi-year view, the number of quantum jobs has tripled since 2018. They're projecting that we need 250,000 people to work in quantum computing by 2030. And we just don't have the people. I would say that I work with University of Missouri System, and I think I've probably had interactions with around 150 to 200 people that are interested in quantum computing. Now, I'm sure there's more, but we can see how rare a thing it is to have a dedication to quantum computing, and just the number of jobs that are needed are going to drastically outstrip the availability of the workforce. These future extrapolations, I've tried to take these from, people who are making financial predictions, who don't have skin in the game. Of course, all of this is highly speculative, but there's many people who are expecting that by 2030 we're looking at $2 trillion of economic value, 35% annual growth to 2032, which is just an insane amount of growth. We can see by what telecommunications are spending and others that and the investments made by chemical firms, finance, optimization, there's a lot of opportunity here. Now, to be fair, we can look at past things like the machine learning booms and stuff, and we've had multiple machine learning winters, so to speak, where we saw this huge burst, and then it slowed down and didn't seem to progress anymore. But also, by the same measure, it's not so much like it died. Just the growth slowed down a little bit until a new technological advance came along. And so I'm not going to sit here and tell you that we're going to grow by 30% per year through 2032, because that'd be insane. It's possible, but at the same time, I don't want to put that out there that, Luke Miller guaranteed you that it's going to, double 10 times in the next 10 years. So some big trends we're seeing as we're moving past the current day. More and more logical qubits. Recently, a firm announced they had a 6,000 qubit system. A year ago, we were amazed there was a 1,000 qubit system. So we're seeing more and more of these logical qubits. More and more specialized hardware and software. So in the early days, like firms like Penny Lane had tried to have a very hardware agnostic platform, but we're seeing a move towards a specialization because sometimes it is quite useful to be very familiar with the specific quantum computer that you're working with if you're specializing an algorithm to have the minimum possible error. We're seeing networking NIST devices. So just like we wire up multiple chips in a laptop to achieve parallelism, we are connecting various quantum computers such that we can stitch together circuits, take a qubit from one system to another to pass on information and things. And so not only are we growing the number of qubits on the chip and the coherence time on a chip, but now we're starting to connect them together for them to pass around information. So we're going to start seeing these qubit arrays where we have, maybe each chip only has 200 qubits, but, maybe you can carefully control how you pass that information around, what's processed on which chip, and achieve ways to move forward. Workforce tools and enterprise training. I've been working with IBM Quantum for about 2 years now. They've doubled the amount of courses they have. They've re-updated all of their documentation. And we're seeing the same thing from Google with Circ, from Amazon with Broquette, from Microsoft. We're seeing them really, really pushing out this free educational resources. And of course, it's clear why they're doing this. It's not because they're like, oh, let's help the poor masses learn how to do quantum computing. It's because they need employees. And they're realizing that as it stands, current university systems and stuff are not producing quantum computing programmers. There's the market's not clear yet. It's just emerging. And so they're really pushing these free educational platforms, these free things, these free certifications. And so they're really, really pushing that. We're also seeing the emergence of like the topological, the Rydberg neutral atom quantum systems. As I said before, it's not clear which one's going to emerge to clearly be the winner. Right now I've thrown in with IBM. I think they have a great platform. They have all the education, they have the training, they have the support, and they're iterating quickly. But, at the same time, we'll see what happens. Right now, I would bet that different quantum computing platforms for different applications. Milestones, we're looking for fault-tolerant quantum computing around 2027 to 2030. That's according to, a lot of the IBM documentation. It's, I'm of two minds. It seems wildly optimistic, but at the same time, the rapid rate of growth is, at least promising. So, synergies, and by this I mean like career synergies. So with AI, we're using, not only do we have our hybrid algorithms where we use quantum computing with AI, but also we're using AI to produce better quantum circuits, better quantum algorithms. Oftentimes I try to relate to people that we are similar to like the early 60s with classical computing, where quantum computing's at. But on the other side of that, our skill and capability with classical computing is greatly accelerating that. Cybersecurity is very, very interested in quantum computing, not only for that RSA encryption risk, and but also for the quantum cryptography options. We're looking at 250,000 jobs by 2030. There's huge talent gaps. And so we're in a situation where there's not quantum computing majors. I'm not aware of any reputable school in the U.S. that's offering a quantum computing major. There's some physics that might have a focus on the quantum side. There's some that have a class, but you're going to have to prove your capability in quantum computing if that's the direction you'd like to go by, things like this, like Qiskit Fall Fest, your GitHub portfolio, training you do on websites like IBM Quantum or, Circ from Google. So this is how people are going to demonstrate their worth. And just like AI, there's going to be machine learning engineers, and there's going to be people around the periphery that are computer scientists or a banker or, work with an insurance company that use it some. And I expect that the same will emerge with quantum computing in the next 10 years, where you'll have dedicated quantum computing experts as well as people who use some quantum computing. I think it's going to have to fall under the umbrella of a thing that most serious data scientists or machine learning engineers are going to have a capability in. That's my, personal extrapolation. And then once again, the risks. All right, we underinvest, it stagnates, companies start cutting off these research programs that aren't producing fruit as quickly as they like. Either that or hype, we pour too much money into it. Okay, we don't give it time for us to advance the software, the hardware, the algorithms behind it. So it's there's a lot of ways. There's no doubt that there will be booms and busts on this, but I generally believe it's going up. All right. And once again, all right, this huge skills gap. Okay, while most other tech sector jobs decreased, we still saw a nearly or a 4.5% global increase in postings. Many of these jobs are going unfilled. All right, lots of jobs in Illinois, Maryland, and these Colorado hubs. All right, careers and roles. Quantum software engineers, I'm seeing postings anywhere between $130,000 to $250,000. Okay, and these aren't senior engineers. These are, people with skills in quantum programming, and things like that. On the hardware side, they have very similar pay ranges. Same with quantum researcher, like algorithmic researcher. Okay. For an application specialist, maybe someone who doesn't have the research background or the full capability, slightly lower, but still very, very competitive salary ranges. IBM Quantum has all their internships posted. They're really good paying internships, and you can see, if you go on Indeed or something, and if you write, quantum computation or a Qiskit, you can see the competitive salaries that are out there for people with these skills. And it makes sense. Someone with these skills is going to be distinguished because it's not like you can be a quantum computation specialist and not know anything about machine learning or, not be capable of interfacing with multiple different libraries and, dependencies. All right, skills. So, with some of this, I'm going to give some asterisks. So you need quantum mechanics, linear algebra, and programming. Okay. Now, you need very little quantum mechanics and, small to moderate amount of linear algebra. A lot of this is about understanding how quantum information works. There's a lot of courses in IBM Quantum that can help you with that. I posted some resources on the starter resources here on the Discord, but there are, a lot of the skills and how you're going to demonstrate them is either going to be, if you're going the full research track like PhD or higher level masters, you're going to show that through publications, but also you're going to demonstrate this through your projects, through course certifications, and things like that. We're seeing AI and ML really merge with quantum computing. A lot of the quantum computing algorithms that we work with, that we'll get into here over the weekend and into next week, we are mixing a machine learning approach where we're updating parameters with classical computers for quantum circuits, and we're passing these back and forth in that hybrid environment. If you want a research job, those are still mostly PhD, unless it's internship. However, we're seeing a lot of these job openings being open to people with master's or bachelor's degrees, plus some type of certification. I got my Qiskit developer certification last month. It's a test over the software, the library that is Qiskit. But master's or bachelor's plus certs for engineering, And also, there's a lot of quantum adjacent jobs. There are jobs that are about, like at IBM or Google, about communicating about quantum, about educating. Um, I haven't seen any real boot camps. I just didn't know what else to call it. These are things like this summer I attended the Kiskit Global Summer School. It was a 2-week thing where we did 5 labs where we worked through various, cutting edge methods of controlling quantum computers. And there's a lot of these different events, these summer schools or these short courses or these, ways to get up to speed quickly. That's kind of what this is. So yeah. Right now, we're seeing a lot of boom in the cryptocurrency domain, AI, sensing and communications. I didn't list it here, but finance is very, very interested. In the last year, some algorithms come out, sample-based quantum diagonalization and sample-based cryolab quantum diagonalization, that are showing a lot of promise for quantum chemistry and like material science. Okay. Growth this year did slow down. But, here's what I'm doing and here's what I recommend. Continue with your degree, continue with what you're doing with your career. But I'll keep sharing and stuff, but like, hey, get these online certifications, okay? Continue building projects like this hackathon to where, I believe quantum's coming. You're a data scientist, a machine learning engineer, a computer scientist with experience in quantum. That's highly pivotable. It's the best time to plant a tree is 10 years ago. The second best time is today. But I don't think we're too late. It's like I said, there's not major quantum computing programs at most schools out there. It's not a primary direction. All these companies are scurrying to provide the educational resources as they see it's coming. I think this is something that if you're looking to get into it, you can do a pivot now. But it's like part of the reason it's paid so well is it's so multidisciplinary. You got to be pretty decent at math, you got to be a pretty decent programmer, and you got to understand how quantum circuits work. But at the same time, if you're looking for something to, set yourself apart, I think this is a great option. All right. I am now going to come back to the group. Does anybody have any questions? Oh, what kind of interview questions would I see for a quantum position? I don't know. So I've looked a little bit and I've read a little bit on these. A lot of them, from what I've seen, and like I've heard from some startups and from IBM stuff, but a lot of these seem to be like, if you make it to the interview, they're pretty interested and it's about getting to know you. That's what I've heard from, some of the like forums and stuff online, startups, IBM and stuff like that, that like, oh, they think you're worthy of talking to, and they're gonna see if, you're blowing smoke, if you can have a basic conversation around it. But I haven't heard anything about like, you used to hear that like, all right, you're in a room and there's a bucket of ice and, like, how are you going to solve it? Or, here, write this hash algorithm by hand on this whiteboard. I haven't seen anything like that. But like, I think I would prepare for it like I would an interview for any technical position. I would be ready to describe what I know. I would state clearly if I don't know something and back it up, that like, hey, I'm willing to learn. I haven't covered that yet. Cover your experience, be proud of what you know, but I'm not an expert here on that. Yeah, I see your question, Cesar. Real quick though, the right now, so the national laboratories are offering a lot of remote work. Some startups are offering some remote work. But what I'm seeing is IBM and Google and stuff. After COVID, they had more remote work, but they tend to be moving back to more on-site work. Ways forward with quantum computing, if you want to stay in Kansas City for the moment, seem to be the national laboratories, startups, quantum adjacent roles, education, some things like that, academia. Um, let's see. Then Cesar, on becoming certified as a quantum developer, I'll type it in the chat, but so there's a variety of free courses on IBM Quantum Learning Platform, and those are free. They have badged courses. There's an exam at the end. You take it, you have the little certificate. Now, there is the Qiskit Developer Certification. This is a 68-question test that's proctored. It costs about $200. You have to get at least a 70%. And that is almost entirely focused on the Qiskit documentation. If you search for it, they have some paid practice tests you can take, and they have a listing of what to study. Mostly it's the Qiskit documentation. It's a lot. Qiskit developer. Impact of AI will be on quantum computing jobs. I think, and don't be wrong, this is highly speculative, but I think we've seen a lot of the damage we're going to see from the LLM boom on programming jobs in general. It's kind of like what the bulldozer did to ditch diggers. We still need people who are skilled to oversee the operation, but we need fewer people of less skills. So, there's fewer people doing basic programming now because one person can ask ChatGPT to, add type checking to this formula they have or whatever the case is they need. So I really see like what I do and what most programming jobs are going to do is that you're expected to work in tandem with AI, that you are supervising this project using AI to work with it. But I will say that I don't think it's developed enough yet for AI to be a substantive risk. There's just not enough examples online for it to train on to tell you whether you should use angle or amplitude encoding for this graph for your quantum graph kernel or whatever the case is. It's it requires that critical thought. It requires the skill of how this applies to the qubits and stuff like that. And so it's I just don't think it's maybe 5 or 10 years from now, as more information gets out there, we have LLMs that are better able to do a good job of quantum programming. But I have several people here from my class, and they can tell you that LLMs will steer you wrong and steer you wrong badly. There's just not enough material out there for it to train on. It takes a level of critical thought on how we encode our information, how we decode the results, what we are doing with our quantum algorithms. So I don't really think AI is a huge risk. It's a training partner. It's a tool that we can use, but it requires significant supervision. Overseas, I don't follow it a lot. I'm from here. I don't probably plan on moving more than 8 hours from here, so I don't follow it a lot. There's a huge amount of stuff going on in Germany. Tel Aviv's huge, Abu Dhabi, Japan. But other than that, I'm not sure. Yeah, you'd have to do your own research there. But I know that, like, I see a lot of stuff coming out of Germany. I see a lot of stuff coming out of Japan. Um, and I know Israel is pursuing it pretty aggressively, but I'm not an expert there.